All right. Hi, Progressives. We are here with another candidate endorsement interview. Tonight, we are speaking with Tamala Takahashi. Tamala is running for City Council. She is a 23-year resident of Burbank, a nonprofit consultant, and pre-licensed LMFT and LPCC. She is currently the chair of the Infrastructure Oversight Board, VP of the Magnolia Park Merchants Association, YMCA board member, Burbank Human Relations Council, VP of Social Action, co-founder of Reusable Burbank, among many other board positions in our community. This is Tamala's second time running for Burbank City Council. In 2020, she received the third highest votes ever in a Burbank election, finishing just 400 votes behind the two winning candidates. Tamala is running for City Council again for a safer, smarter, and more sustainable Burbank. Welcome, Tamala. I'm so glad you were able to join us tonight.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I would love to give you just a couple minutes to tell us anything else you want us to know about yourself, why you're running for City Council again, and touch on just a few of the topics that are most important to you to focus on if you do win the election for City Council.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, as Amy said, we've lived here for 23 years and we have three kids who grew up here. Our oldest is 24, middle is 21, and our youngest is just about to turn 19 next month. And I'm running again because I want Burbank to be a city that my kids can live in. And right now, as it stands, unless they live with me or sleeping on my couch or rebuild an ADU for them, they really can't live here right now. The obvious is housing costs because it's just so difficult to live in our city, but also none of our kids have cars. And they actually, looking at their finances, don't think they can afford cars for a long time. The number one expense for folks is housing, and number two is car ownership. So they just don't see it's out of reach for them. So I'd love to have a city where they can get around without a car. And then selfishly, I love Burbank. I think it's one of the best cities in Los Angeles and maybe in the country. I don't know. I love Burbank. It's a great city. And I want to retire here. I want to stay here. I want to stay in the same house and stay in the same neighborhood until the very end. And so I want to be able to have a city that we can retire in as well. Just overall, I don't know. I think a lot of folks who are watching this video probably feeling similarly. I just feel like we want to do something, right? We want to be a part of impact in the world. We want to be a part of solving some of the problems that we see and being a positive, force of change. And my experience and my, reach is local. So I've been a local resident, as you saw with the list of things I'm involved in. And I really want to make a difference here where I can. So council is a place where I feel like I can make a difference.
Excellent.
And then you asked about topics, right?
Yes.
Topics. Okay. So I have a very long list of things that I want to work on. I have a Trello board with a million things on it, but a few of the things that are really important to me. One is environment. And I honestly believe, and I think our kids' generations believe, and they're younger than them believe too, that if we don't have an environment, we have nothing else, right? So we're already seeing this week, while we're doing this video, the effects of global warming and how we're having this extremely unusually hot couple of weeks, and not just us, but the whole country, right? Amongst the environmental, the umbrella of environment, everything's important. But for me, a big one is plastics and waste. So those are an area where I've been working a lot in, although the entire environmentalism sphere is important to me. I also am an advocate for mental health. And I believe that every policy, every practice, everything we do in a city or organization or nonprofit or even a family or naiborhood has an effect on our mental health. And it's our responsibility as leaders to recognize the human impact of the things that we do and decide on. Not just financial is important, and systemic impact is important, but it's the human impact that matters to everybody in the community. So those are two big ones for me. And then a lot of the other little ones kind of fall under that umbrella.
Excellent. All right. Well, we're going to actually start with one of those, and something that you talked about in your intro, and that is transportation and sustainability. So the City Council rejected the proposal by the LA Metro for the proposed bus rapid transit plan on Olive Avenue. That would have removed parking on Olive, required the street to be widened, would have had an impact on the businesses along Olive Avenue. And so the city instead requested to maintain mixed use transit on Olive. In response, Metro proposed an alternative solution of maintaining the parking on Olive, converting the right lane in each direction to a bus-only lane, and then maintaining the left lane in each direction plus the center lane for general transit use. Do you support the alternate solution? Why or why not? This is a very multi-part question. And then just generally, how does public transit factor into your views on making Burbank a greener and more equitable city? And what other ideas do you have to move Burbank forward in this area?
Okay, great question. And do you have 2 hours to talk about it? Transportation is very near and dear to me. In fact, right before we started this conversation, I was telling Amy about how I just got back from another event where I rode to it on my e-bike, and on the way there, I got a flat tire. So I was trying to get home on my e-bike with the flat tire, and so I own an e-bike, and about 50% of my travel is on my e-bike in local travel. And I want to do more, but it's not safe enough in our community to be able to do it more. And that's one of the things I would love to see is a more safe bike network. That's kind of general. But the BRT, you asked about that first. So the alternative, or the second option, is called option 2, of having one of the lanes dedicated on both sides for the bus, is, in my opinion, the best alternative of the 3. So the 3 options are mixed use, then the dedicated lane is the second option, and the third option is the taking parking away. And in the very beginning, I was pro mixed use. And so I did a lot of research on the effects of taking away parking, or taking away travel lane, and the benefits of it and the mixed use and how that flows in other cities and that kind of thing. And I've come to shift my position. And now I see that the using a dedicated lane is actually better for safer streets. I can get into detail why, but it's safer streets. It's going to actually reduce traffic, believe it or not. I know most folks don't believe me when I say that, but if we can go into detail, I can tell you how it will reduce the congestion in traffic. It will revitalize or vitalize the commercial district. So BRTs that are fully featured BRTs with dedicated lanes and full featured stations and all the upgrades end up with a corridor that gets upgraded and revitalized. So my vision of that street, I don't know if you've ever been to Kenneth Village or Montrose, my vision of that, of Olive, is to turn it from what it is now, which is, it's okay, but it's not really notable, into a street where we can really be proud of the commercial corridor. So in addition to the fact that it will also provide much needed inter and intra transit for a lot of our folks. So that option is, to me, the best option of the 3. I know a lot of folks are advocating for the mixed use, mixed flow. And one of my main concerns with the mixed flow is safety. So if we do mixed flow, we can't have bikes on the street. With a dedicated lane, we can't have bikes. And if we do mixed flow, it's going to cause a lot of more cars trying to get around the buses when they're stopped, and people trying to get across and turn left and right with the buses flowing. So having that dedicated lane actually makes it a lot safer.
Excellent. And then I asked so many questions in a row. So the last part was, what other ideas do you have to move Burbank forward in the area of sustainable and equitable transportation?
Yeah. So back to the bike network, I strongly believe in a complete citywide bike network that folks can get around by bike if they choose. Not to say to take away from the car network, but just to create a network of biking that's safely able to get around, particularly our students and our seniors. Those are the 2. I'm 51 now. I just had a birthday. And my e-bike, it is a miracle transportation device that I hope that I can use that and drive less. My father had macular degeneration in his eyes. And so by the time he turned, I think 70 or late 60s, he couldn't drive at all at night. And driving during the day was still kind of a challenge for him. So it's very possible that I might find myself unable to drive, in a street, but I'll still be able to see enough to be able to bike. So that's, for me, I really hope that I can be able to bike as a senior citizen later. And then also that the kids can get to school safely. So the bike network is very, very important to me. And then in addition, I would love, love, love to see a bus circulator in our city, to be able to get around our city on bus, not just to get in and out of our city on bus, but once you're in the city, to be able to get around it. So that would be something I think that would be a good addition to our community.
Great. Thank you. Kind of staying with the topic of transportation in our city, and you touched on this a little bit, talking about, bike riding in our city. dangerous driving, street racing have been major concerns for residents here for a really long time. I mean, I live up above Glen Oaks and I hear them racing up and down our streets all the time. The tragic accident on Glen Oaks last year pushed the issue, I think, more into the spotlight, not just in Burbank, but across the nation. What are some ideas you have to help make our streets safer?
Well, I'm going to touch on Glen Oaks specifically since you mentioned that is our local raceway. So that street during COVID especially became very attractive for street racing because it's straight, it's fairly level, and during the COVID there wasn't a lot of cars, right? So it kind of became attractive. So we've upped our city has upped the police presence and impounding cars or taking away people's licensing, which we absolutely need to do. That hit them where they are the most concerned is like having their car, right? But that's only can only go so far, and it's not a systemic problem, a systemic solution. My view is that systemic solutions are needed for systemic problems, and that's a one-off solution for each person who does the speed racing. So in my view, we need to redesign the streets so that they're not as appealing to be a raceway with street calming. The way I love the idea of having a roundabout in there somewhere. I love roundabouts personally. Not everybody loves them, but I love roundabouts. I've lived where there's been roundabouts. They are, they're a little confusing in the beginning, but they statistically reduce accidents by, I can't even tell you how much they reduce accidents. It's a lot. It's a big jump down, and it slows down traffic. Besides the fact that you got to, maneuver around and there's something right in the middle, but just people in general tend to be more careful when they're going around a roundabout. So, and then also another cool thing about a roundabout is you don't need lights. So it's a lower cost of infrastructure because you don't need to have a light system, which is great. But one thing people don't realize about the speed racing is not just Glen Oaks. It's up and down those streets that are next to Glen Oaks in the hills. And I don't know if anyone who's on this call has gone down one of those hills, but they're like a roller coaster ride. You just put on the gas and let go and go, wee, right? And there's stop signs and stuff. But when you're going down that street, it is just so easy to just roll through those signs. So I was driving down one of those the other day and I'm like, what would be really cool in one of these streets? It's something we have over here in Magnolia Park and a number of our streets is to have those little inlets that make the street thinner at certain places. So in order to go down the street, you kind of have to slow down and maneuver. It doesn't make it like you are going around them, but you just have to be more careful. And that would kind of signal to slow down and just make it less of a speedway. So there's things like that we can do, I think, that would really just kind of change the psychology of driving around there. And the similar approaches can be used in other areas of the city too that have fast speeds as well. I think we should have, there's several intersections in the city that I'm just imagining in my mind on the city map in my mind right now. Well, roundabouts would be the miracle solution. Woo! Now it actually happening. Okay, I'm going to be realistic here. The people on the call going, what? Roundabouts? There's no way they'll get through in our city. But just having the idea in my head, I think that's something we should consider, and just thinking outside the box of some solutions that maybe are different than what we've normally done in the past.
Excellent. I also haven't lived anywhere with roundabouts, but I've spent lots of time and I enjoy them too. I think everything you said. All right. So you also talked a little bit about housing when you were talking about wanting your kids to be able to live in Burbank. It is a huge issue for residents here. The cost of housing has increased drastically over the past several years. And, currently over half of Burbank households, I see anywhere from 51 to 60%, depending on, which site I'm looking on, are renters. Average rent for a 2-bedroom apartment in Burbank is about $2,900 per month. It's more in some neighborhoods, it's less in others. And I know I look all the time. According to rent affordability standards, a tenant's monthly income should be 3 times their rent. So in order to afford the average 2-bedroom apartment in Burbank, a family should have a household income of $104,400 per year. And the median household income in Burbank as of 2020 was only $79,212. That's a huge gap. So what would you do to make housing more affordable for Burbank residents? And along those lines, would you support some kind of a rent stabilization ordinance?
Okay. Let's solve the housing problem.
In how many minutes do you have
In
left?
5 minutes. Okay, so just to give a little baseline of, I think it's really important to understand the cause of our housing problem in Burbank, and because housing is a problem everywhere, it's not just here. But we have a particularly challenging housing problem because our housing ratio, work to housing ratio is 3 to 1. So for every one housing, there's 3 jobs. Every one residential spot, there's 3 jobs, right? So what that does is and that is the highest ratio in the state, and it's near the highest ratio in the entire country. So what that does, and for those of you who remember your macroeconomics back in high school, is that puts an incredible amount of pressure and demand on our system for people to want housing, which benefits and favors those who are renting out spaces, right? Or who are selling their homes because there's a huge demand. And that has increased over the past 25 years, 30 years. Our residential number of residents in our city hasn't gone up really much since 1990. So the residents have stayed the same, the jobs have increased. So any of this like traffic and other problems that we see in the city that we think, oh my gosh, there's just so many people in our city, it's all commercial that's causing that. Okay. So we need to build more housing. I mean, if just from that alone it's the imbalance is just out of control. So we need to build more housing. When we build more housing, that pressure will be released. Will it solve the housing pricing crisis? No, because the whole country is facing it. But at least that portion of it will be less stressed, right? Okay. So number one, build more housing. And any housing release the stress. But we also need to really look at housing, to your point, to the folks who are in that median income tax or the median income bracket, who are basically our workforce in the city, right? So it'd be medium and like low medium income bracket. And that's the housing that is both unavailable and when it is available, incredibly hard to get into. And once it's in, it's unstable to be in it, right? So very important to acknowledge that reality when we're talking about this. So, housing is one. And then I think it's really important to recognize that the housing that we build, we're building all rental units, which is fine. We need rental units, right? But what we really need is purchasable housing. So where do we do that? Because there's no space to move out, so we can't do single family homes. So we're looking at condos and townhomes. And we're also looking at potentially maybe adding housing on lots. And so that can be purchasable, multiple families purchasing a lot to have several houses on a lot, that kind of thing. So those are really important aspects to think about when we're doing housing. I'm concerned about our teachers, firefighters, people who work in the city, our workforce leaving because they can't afford to live here. And so in addition to the building housing, I think we have to look at real honest solutions of social housing, of how we can increase our social housing in the city. All cities are looking at this. It's not just Burbank. And so far we have a really good start with the Burbank Housing Corporation. I don't know if you've ever been to one of the Burbank Housing Corporation social housing. Okay, so when we think of social housing, we think of like the projects, right? Which was total failure. But the Burbank Housing Corporation has this amazing system and program where they buy properties and they revitalize them and they create affordable housing for certain income levels, right? We need to expand that kind of project that is high quality, affordable housing that's well maintained for long periods of time, and then allocate some of that specifically for our workforce. So I'm looking at BHC as one of the solutions, and also our new Tri-City authority between Burbank, Glendale, and Pasadena to create some more social housing. So that's another part. Okay. Those two are really great, but then you're like, well, what about the people who live here whose their housing prices going up and they can't stay? That's a really tough question, because the instinct that we want to say is like, stop the housing prices from going up so we can stay, right? The challenge with that though is that if we do any kind of like, hey, stop, no more increases or whatever, it will help some folks, but there are going to be a number of folks who end up getting pushed out. We've already seen it actually pushed out of their homes, so that the folks who own the property sell it and it gets redone and upgraded and it turns into market rate housing. So we end up losing the benefit that kind of sort of is there already. So those like nice, like just under market value apartment complexes become market rate. And so either way, you get pushed out, which sucks either way. So I understand that the draw for rent control, But unfortunately, there's a few people who will benefit from it, but unfortunately, it ends up actually pushing people out too. So we need to find a solution where people are protected without pushing them out of their homes. They're protected in their rent without pushing them out of their homes with revitalization. The answer to that, I'm not sure. And I don't know if the answer did exist already, we'd already be doing it. So that's where we really need to dig in and look at some innovative ways. And I think like the ideas of this, like purchasing housing with 3 or 4 families, purchasing a lot and renting out the units together, or all living in units together, or something like that is really important. But I'm not against rent control per se, but right now the way that it works is it's unfortunately going to push a lot of people out, and I just don't want to see that happen. So I'm willing my mind to be changed, but right now I'm kind of in that space.
Thank you. One more question on the topic of housing, and that is around the unhoused population in Burbank. And what efforts would you focus on to provide more support for that population?
Housing.
It's a
homelessness cannot be solved without housing.
Yeah.
Housing is not the only part of the solution, but there is no solution without housing, period. So any other story that anyone tells you is not true, in my opinion, because if without housing, where can people go? You're shifting them around to different places to be unhoused, right? So, so housing is absolutely number one essential. No other way around it. Okay. But in addition to housing, one of the those who work in the housing, sphere or homelessness sphere know that a lot of the homeless or unhoused issues. There's a lot that happens before somebody becomes visibly unhoused, right? So you see the unhoused that are in the tents, you see them that are sleeping on benches, or they're walking around with their materials, their stuff in a shopping cart, and that's what we see. And so when somebody brings up the word homeless, the immediate vision are these folks, right? But there is a whole number of folks who you don't see who are not there yet. Those services, we do not have enough to support those folks to keep them from getting to that point in the first place. So yes, we need housing for the folks who are currently unhoused. And we also need to make a more robust and available services for those who are either housing insecure or who are just on that brink, or maybe going back and forth, who are maybe sometimes have housing and don't. And if without that, they're going to end up in those visible unhoused situations. I think Burbank is actually doing better than a lot of cities. In fact, just found out today that our count last year was 291 homeless folks, and now our number is 260. So we're slowly housing people more than they're becoming unhoused, which is great, which is what we want. We want to see that in the black, right? And part of it is housing people individually, and part of it is making sure these systems exist. I'm very, very excited about the tiny homes proposition. I don't know if you've heard about this, but I have not been a proponent for shelters. I know a lot of folks want shelters, but shelters, I'm going to be straight up, shelters are unsafe for women and children, and they're unsafe for LGBTQ. So yes, shelters are great for certain folks to be in, but they're not safe for a lot of the demographics. And so it's really important to have safe places for folks to go. Tiny homes is that safe place. It's a great idea. I love it. It's got wraparound services. So that's the kind of thing we need to look at. And I don't think it's being funded by us. I think it's being funded by Measure H Fund. So these are the kinds of things we need to look at as innovative ideas of how to support our I want to say temporarily unhoused folks who will have future housing with our help.
Thank you. All right. We have a few more minutes. I'm going to try to get through a couple more questions really quickly. So you've been vocal in your support for the moratorium on new gun shops in the city. This allows city staff, as you know, more time to develop the plan for how we move forward on the issue of gun shops. Gun store owners have admitted that they don't open their shops in Burbank because they want to be in Burbank, but because we have the most permissible zoning laws. So would you support a change in the zoning laws in order to regulate how, where, and how many gun shops we have in Burbank? And then along those lines, what other measures would you support to address this issue?
Yes. Yes, I would support those things. And I have a feeling that's what they're going to be proposing at the city staff's going to be proposing those things. At the very least, get in the same in alignment with all the other cities and jurisdictions around us, so that the businesses have similar rules and regulations in all the cities, right? It makes sense for any business style, in my opinion. So that's the first step, right? And I also think that we can look at potentially, I know this is not going to be popular with some of the viewers, but potentially looking at a sin tax for gun ownership and ammunition and some of the other products, and not a steep one, but one enough that it will help the transition. We can even help the businesses transition, especially if they're being asked to move. So we can help the schools and we can help the businesses, so that I don't want to punish any business that got in with the rules that we have and force them to change their business model because, you know, the city didn't get their ducks in a row, right? It's not fair to them. But at the same time, we do have to be conscientious about where our gun stores are, how they're presented in our community, and what kind of culture we're supporting here. I don't know if you know, but of folks who commit suicide, for example, the number one way that folks commit suicide is with gun use. It's number one by far. And the second highest reason for death between ages 10 and 28 is by suicide. And the first is by accidental death. And both of those are guns is the number one way. So we just have to be honest about that. And do we want to be a part of that in our culture, in our community, of ignoring that truth? So I think it's important that we have the conversations. They're hard, but we need to do it.
Great. Thank you. Okay. So I know this is an area that you are very passionate about, and Zoom is going to cut us off in about 8 minutes.
Okay. I'll try to be short.
I want to give you time to talk about anything else you want to and give us your contact info. So I should not have left this question for last, but Burbank has been taking steps to become a greener city. What other measures would you support to move us even further forward in this effort?
Oh my gosh. Again, do we have an hour, right? Oh my gosh. Well, okay. Where do I even start? Okay. So I think that I co-authored a plastics ordinance with Reusable Burbank. Very excited about it. And I won't go into details, but let's just say that this comprehensive plastic ordinance is in the pipeline. And my hope is it's going to be in front of council in 2023, early 2023. And if I'm on council, I will ask about it. Where is that? I want to see it. So very exciting stuff. I'm super happy about how the greenhouse gas emissions reduction plan has integrated a lot of the Green New Deal, more forward-thinking possibilities for that. So that's exciting. And now that we are in this, I know we have just a couple minutes. Now that we're in this space where we can't water our lawns, which I think is kind of like COVID, where it's an opportunity in disguise, where we can shift now to lawns or front yards that are less demanding with water. So these are some examples of like many that I've got about how we can be a more environmentally friendly city without doing things that are going to be like putting people off or making everybody have to change their lifestyle like altogether.
Great. And I should have asked that question a little earlier. All right. So 2 minutes, probably, maybe 3. What else do you want us to know? And then make sure that we get your website address and the best way that our group members can contact you if they want to hear any more about all of these ideas that you have put forth tonight. And I mean, you're so knowledgeable on all of these topics. So if they want to ask you any other questions or hear any more about your knowledge on these.
Yeah. So I don't know if you're going to get this up before. Oh, you will probably. So on September 26th, I'm going to have a Reddit AMA. So hop by Reddit / the Burbank subreddit for an AMA. I think I'll be the first candidate ever in history of Burbank to have an AMA on Reddit. I will be, if I'm elected, I will be the first Gen Xer on City Council. Woo, Gen X. And representative there. If I'm elected, I'll be the first person on council that has children that LGBTQ. So that's super exciting. And I'll be the first council member who rides an e-bike. So that's pretty exciting too. You can get a hold of me or find out more information at my website, which is www.tamalatakahashi.com. And follow me on social media. That's where all the exciting stuff happens. You can see all the things I'm working on. And if you follow me on Twitter, you get to see some wonky policy stuff too. So Facebook is Tamala 4 Burbank. And Instagram is Tamala 4 Burbank. And Twitter is Tamala Takahashi. So please follow me there, ask questions there, ask me the hard ones. Like, well, if we build all these buildings, how are we going to save water? Really dig in and ask those questions that you want to ask, because I love those conversations. They're my fave.
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much, Tamala, for being here with us tonight. I really enjoyed talking with you and hearing all of your ideas. And like I said, all of the knowledge that you have around these areas. We will continue to have these interviews throughout the month of September. And then in early October, our membership will vote on the endorsements, and we will let everyone know how that turns out.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. It was a joy.
Me too. All right. Bye.